Hello. If you're on the site today, you've made it to the initial planning meeting for EarthX 2021. I hope everybody's doing well. Last year certainly was an interesting year. This will be our 5th year of EarthX, and we're excited to begin the planning process with all you all in attendance. We know our numbers will continue to grow, but let's jump into this today and talk a little bit about what EarthX 2021 is going to be about. Our concept is pretty straightforward. This is a come as you are exercise opportunity for all of the critical lifeline sectors. And our goal is to present a situation where you can renew, review, develop, take a look at your policies and procedures. Realize that EarthX 21, as in previous years, will be widely distributed. Last year, I'm happy to report we had over 41 countries with players in them. Well over 12,000 people played even in the middle of the pandemic. So the exercise was a big hit last year as well. We'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. But the whole idea of EarthX 21 is to make sure that we provide a platform that engages people the way they need to be engaged and provides that forum for an in-depth discussion. EarthX is not a lights and sirens exercise, if you know what that means. If you're an artillery person, you're not going to pull the lanyard on during this exercise. You're going to sit and talk and think about these situations and scenarios and develop the things that you need to do next. So very much an open construction that's been well received over the last 4 years. This will be our 5th year with EarthX. Some assumptions that drive EarthX forward. Everything you need to play EarthX is built into the actual exercise. You're not going to need to bring a lot of extra materials or develop a lot of materials. You will need access to the internet, obviously, since it is virtually delivered. We do expect organizations to bring their own policies and procedures, but even if you don't have those, that's not a reason to not play. But if you do have them, obviously, that will help you with as you work through the scenarios. We do recommend, though, that you have, if you're an organization playing as an organization, that you have at least one person to serve as a facilitator and a recorder. It just makes the administration of the exercise that much easier. And then if you're an organization that needs an assessment to go with your exercise effort, you'll be responsible for your own assessment. We don't do that piece. So EarthX this year. EarthX is a little bit different this year in the build and the direction that we're going, but still along similar lines. The question we're asking this year is, are you ready? There will be 2 phases to EarthX. Phase 1 will be a fire scenario. Phase 2 will be a flood scenario, and we'll talk more about that. But you'll also get some valuable preparatory training and advanced material that'll be part of the EarthX experience this year. So as we talk about it, let's just jump into the meat of this. Today's session won't be very long, but we do have some points we would like to share so that you can begin to develop your own plans for implementation of EarthX. First off, EarthX will be available from 1 September through 31 October. Very much the same as last year. We found over the previous years that extending the hours of play and the length of play is beneficial. We had so many people last year that played multiple times. And just to share a little background information, we actually had people continue to register and play well after we officially shut the exercise down, all the way up until February. So I think there's a thirst and a desire to continue to exercise. And I've got some great information to share with you on that later in the slide deck. So 1 September through 31 October, you pick the date and time, and then you're off to the races. When you look at what we're doing this year, just a few minor modifications to the setup. I think we're very close to the sweet spot after 4 years. We will have a lane for individual and families. Huge believers in that. Hope that you all play as an individual or bring your family together. Actually got contacted by a group last year that asked if the exercise would be available because they wanted to do it on Thanksgiving. We did extend the hours. We didn't shut it down. But what a great opportunity to bring the whole family together and talk about some of the critical aspects of individual preparedness. But from a functional area, we'll be doing communities and leaders again, government functions, primarily state and national governments, critical lifeline utilities, always a hallmark of an EIS council exercise, medical and healthcare, again, huge part of our pyramid of players. We've got some outstanding people helping us develop that lane this year. Private sector, always a big part of what we do. And then this year, we're going to fold communications and information operations together and really drive home that critical nature of needing to have these sectors as prepared as they possibly can be. So again, seven different opportunities to engage with EarthX. Each one is slightly different, but along the same lines. So when we take a look at the threat for this year, we made some conscious decisions looking at the path that we've taken. Last year, as if you played last year, you know that was more or less what we called the culminating year for us. This year, what we're doing is we're taking a look at those events that are absolutely threatening real world resilience across the globe. And climate change is the flavor of the day, unfortunately. The question is, are you prepared? And is your family prepared? And is your organization prepared? And you may say, well, what do you mean, are we prepared? Well, specifically, two things we're going to highlight in this year's exercise. Do you know how to evacuate? Do you have a plan to support evacuation? Do you know how to make that decision? And then if you have to evacuate and then you get a chance to come back, do you know how to be part of the restoration effort? And it takes an entire community coming together to restore. So that's the central focus for this year is climate change driven disasters. And we're going to focus on making that evacuation decision, whether to evacuate, not to evacuate. And then if you do have to evacuate or you do fall under one of these terrific disasters, terrible disasters, do you know how to become part of that restoration mission? Because restoration really is the key to whether a community survives or not, or an organization survives or not. So when you take a look at the two threats that we're going to deal with this year, and there's going to be more information made available as we go through the cycle of events for this year. But if you take a look at flooding, and you look at what's just happened in the United States over the last couple of years, we've had flooding at levels that we've not seen before in many, many, many decades. And more importantly, we've seen it in back-to-back years. It was just a few short months ago when we saw massive flooding in the heartland of the United States. Iowa, Nebraska, Arkansas, Oklahoma. Those places always had local flooding, but seldom have we ever seen flooding at the level that it reached. We're familiar with coastal flooding. What we're not necessarily prepared for is the kind of pounding hurricane flooding that's going to be caused by climate change, or the fact that the coastal erosion is going to cause even more exacerbating issues that we have to deal with from an emergency management or preparedness standpoint. So flash floods, definitely something that the people in Louisiana, Florida, and Texas can tell us about. But we've seen flash floods now all over the United States. I don't expect you to be able to read this slide. I put it up here. You'll get all these slides in the slide deck. As always, we will send the slides out afterwards and make the recording available. But there's a few points in here that are interesting to just think about. We've already seen major flooding events in just the first few months of 21. We know that flooding by itself is not a matter of just having too much water. It's about having too much water with other things in the water, the contamination from floodwaters and what that can be. We also know that when it floods, more often than not, there are tremendous impacts on critical lifeline infrastructures, not the least of which is water. We had an outstanding Global Resilience Commission meeting just last month on the impact of water and water resilience. Hopefully you were able to be part of that. If not, it is out on our GRCOM website, and you can listen to that particular webinar. But we know that flooding is one of these issues that even if you're prepared for it, in some cases, there's no way to hold back the floodwaters. I was part of a major flooding along the Ohio River that ended emptying into the Mississippi River several years ago. And even though we had dams and dikes and control systems in place, those failed during the massive flooding event that occurred. So you've got to be thinking all the time in the back of your mind, are you truly prepared? Unless you're on the highest spots you can get to, the chances are no. But the other issue with flooding that a lot of times we miss is the tremendous impact to the economy. And when you have a town that floods or a community that floods, the odds are that unless some dramatic efforts are made to have a clean restoration and a quick, efficient restoration, the economic viability of that community is going to be put at risk. So flooding is definitely one of the major areas that we all need to be prepared for. The other one, though, that is unusual in our day and time is what's going on with fires around the world. And I say around the world because traditionally we thought of wildland fires being in certain parts of the United States. We will share with you data on future sessions that shows that fires now are raging in different areas than we ever really thought they would be in the past. I was recently on a call with some great friends in the EU with a group called CERENT, and they're interested in partnering with us on EarthX, and we certainly look forward to that. But they were sharing with us for the first time really within the EU footprint, wildland firefighters are something they're greatly concerned with. Climate change is impacting all parts of the world. And again, what you look at is the loss of a community, the loss of an economic engine, and just the sheer expense of the rebuild after a major fire. Everybody realizes what has gone on over the last 3 years in California, Washington, and Oregon. But as I said before, we have seen large uncontrolled fires in places we've never seen before. And it's not just the fire itself that's the issue, it's what that fire releases into the environment and what that fire releases into the surrounding community that has to deal with it. So when you talk about having to evacuate a whole community to another location, you have a surge impact that not everybody is thinking about in their local emergency operating plan. So that's something that we need to highlight. And then, of course, the things that go with any kind of a disaster or emergency. So as always, when we put EarthX together, we start with what are the things that we would like to learn. And you can see there the list on the right. Basically, we're following a similar path. We want people to understand the situation they're dealing with. We want them to understand the impact from these black sky disasters. And make no mistake, EarthX 2021 will be a black sky event. By the time we get down to the last phase, it wouldn't be an EIS Council event if it wasn't black sky. We want you to be able to understand the interdependencies. This year, we're highlighting the fact that we want people to understand evacuation and preparedness for evacuation. Obviously, we want you to think about courses of action. No really good plan ends up with a single course of action. You need to be able to have some flexibility in your approach and what you're going to do. One of the things we'll highlight again this year, very successful last year, is this idea of making and adjusting decisions. If you've ever been part of a true disaster response, you can have a great plan to get started, but the real level of effort comes in when you run up against something that makes you change your plan, and how quickly you can do that, how efficiently, and then obviously how effectively. And then, of course, what we're adding in again is this idea of critical restoration. How do we restore critical lifeline utilities so they can be used to restore the community? All points that'll be part of EarthX this year. And then, I wouldn't be the resilience director for the council if we didn't have resilience learning objectives. Overall, what we're trying to do is get you out of your comfort zone and get you into the learning zone and the growth zone. So if you play EarthX, you will find that your pace will pick up. Our videos are always extremely well done. And if you engage at the proper level, you will feel your blood start to move a little bit faster. We want you to improve your plans and your concepts. We want you to refine the areas that you're going to work within. We're going to present to you some future tools and some current tools to help you engage with those. And then ultimately what we want you to do is think about internal and external future training events. I shared with somebody just recently this week a story that still makes me feel good about over the course of our EarthX experience. People who on the first year where we introduced the concept of a black sky event really didn't have any idea of what they could do when communications was lost or power was lost. And then after a couple of years of EarthX, they wrote me a very nice note and said, because of EarthX, we now actually have plans that we believe we can execute. We know who to contact. We know what we need to do. We've arranged for backup power, all the things that we teach in EarthX. And that made us feel good. But that's a constantly evolving set of things that we need to consider. And so we hope that you will find the benefit of participating as well. So as I talked about earlier, just a slightly different version on this. If this is your first time into EarthX, take a look at this slide. I think when you compare this slide to maybe other exercises you've played, you'll notice something completely different. Most of the exercises I played in my professional life were what I call single pulse electric exercises. It was an exercise with a threat that was directed to come head on at me, and I only had to deal with information in my lane, my area. It was strictly about one thing within emergency management or one thing within the military. What you see with EarthX is the opportunity to get in and select the area of play that you want to be involved with. And again, this year, we're going to allow people to play multiple functional areas. So I recommend every single person play the individual and family lane, but you can pick from any one of these other lanes. And realize when you actually register, you'll get to sub-select within those groups down to 38 different embedded lanes of play. So we give you lots of opportunity to kind of pick your own poison. And there's great utility in possibly playing one or more functional areas, because while you're going to get exposed to cross-sector information in all of the lanes, seeing what that looks like from a different perspective is extremely valuable in improving your own plan, your own approach. So again, the opportunity will be there this year. I'm really proud of the exercise team that's put this together. I think they continue to raise the bar on what can be done in a virtual exercise. So when you start talking about EarthX itself this year, and we'll spend a few minutes now actually describing the exercise, there's going to be the two primary threats, and both of those threats are going to be exacerbated by climate change. And when we talk about that, as I shared with the group yesterday, we're not talking about your typical household fire, and we're not, or even a business fire. We're not talking about a typical riverine flooding event. We're talking about a catastrophic event that is going to pull on all the resources of the region to be prepared to respond. And so you need to raise your thought process up that this is not a simple thing, and there won't be any simple answers. We will make it as difficult as we can, and that's the whole point of an exercise, is to press where we need to press. So again, fire and flood, the way the exercise will work, and I'm going to repeat a few of these points several times. It'll kick off with an opening video that will set the stage and bring you into the exercise environment. You will get a second situational awareness video that will actually provide some data for you to consume and to begin your own process for developing situational awareness. You'll get a chance, and we added this last year, to actually stop for a few moments and think through your own level of risk. Are you at risk? If you are at risk, what avenue, what vector should you be concerned with? Because once you determine the vector of the risk, you'll be able to determine your level of vulnerability, and that will begin helping you decide what are the right courses of action. Now, one of the things that we introduced last year was this concept of Monte Carlo. If you haven't played Monte Carlo, I'll talk a little bit more about it, but if you did play, this year it was such a hit, we got such great feedback. We've actually introduced Monte Carlo into 2 spots in both phases. So you're going to get a chance to spin the wheel, so to speak, 2 times in each phase. You'll get a chance after you conduct risk analysis to actually go through the course of action development process, which is the way that you actually sit back and go, well, based off my organization or my situation, what options are available to me? What are the things that I could think about doing? Obviously, since I've talked about evacuation, there's always going to be 2 things. Should I evacuate or not evacuate? What if I evacuate, or what if I stay? So there's at least 2, but I hazard to bet for some of you all, there will be 3 or 4 or more. You only have a limited amount of time, but still you'll get a chance to think through those and discuss them. Then finally, like all good exercises, we give you a chance to actually make a decision and work your way through it. After you've made that initial decision, we'll give you some real world feedback, which will include a chance where the environment changes, and maybe you get a chance to come up with a course of action change. So that's basically the way this is going to play out. There's a couple of things that I want to thump on here a little bit more. And these are the major training and resilience themes that are embedded. So understanding and preparing for evacuation or hardening your location, improving your situational awareness, and then reacting to new information. that reacting to new information is something that most organizations really need to practice. Now, I will say that COVID has continually thrown us curves. And a lot of our organizations in emergency management have got very good at dealing with curves, but this kind of a curve will be different than the kind that COVID has thrown us. So reacting to new information and finding your process for making those subtle changes or dramatic changes is part of what we want to give you the opportunity to learn. And then we want to push into the planning effort because we don't really think that from what we've done across the country and in other nations, this idea of preparing for restoration is not something that we're all prepared to do at this point. I will say that our utilities have great mutual aid plans and they know how to restore. The issue is when you truly face a black sky scenario where portions of potentially the transmission or generation functions have been impacted, we don't have great plans on how long that's going to take and how we, on the emergency management or community lifeline sector side, are going to deal with those cascading impacts for multiple weeks. You only have to look back a few months to the power outage in Texas to realize what happened in a very well-developed part of the country when power was lost for multiple days to weeks, the cascading impacts. And then how long did it take to actually restore? Those are things that EarthX will give you a chance to talk your way through. And then as always, we will highlight emergency communications and give you a chance to refine your process. And we'll help you with the idea of how do you support other actions. No one sector can heal themselves. I've taught so many different black sky exercises, and invariably there's somebody in the audience that says, we got it covered, we don't need anybody else. And it's always kind of fun to poke at those people because nobody has it all figured out. Everybody's dependent on something else. Electricity is at the heart, but we all travel down the road. So we all need the transportation sector at a minimum. And I don't know about you guys, but I need water pretty quickly too. So the idea of how do we support all those other critical lifelines and get them back to bear and restore government. And then ultimately, this all comes down to mutual aid, bringing people in from outside your region so that your impacted populations can actually restore themselves and then come back in and be part of the overall restoration process. So those are major training and resilience themes that we'll give you a chance to play through. A couple of other overarching themes that have really been brought to bear to us at the council over the last year and a half, and really these are coming out of COVID, and that's the impact from supply chain and transportation. You heard me mention transportation a second ago. We are so dependent now on our lifeline of supplies. We're so dependent on just-in-time delivery. And if anything happens to bottleneck our transportation hubs, we're going to have an impact. Just think back a few weeks to the canal with one boat closing the canal. What if those were the ports leaving China? What if those were the ports on the receiving side in the United States or Europe? We did a little bit of that in last year's exercise, if you remember. Supply chain and transportation, essential elements of your plan, how you're going to deal with interruptions. But then one of the biggest one is what are you going to do about workforce protection? How are you going to educate the workforce? And how are you going to maintain their level of awareness? When you talk about fire and flood, with the exception of hurricanes, we don't see these things coming very quickly. The amount of time we have for preparedness is very short. That's why we have to have excellent preparedness plans now. So these are things that we'll bring to bear and let you talk about them, let you write them into your plan or at least address them. And then finally, kind of a hallmark of what we do in EarthX is we will pull back the cover completely on cascading consequences. And we'll make it really clear about when things most likely will go offline if you suffer a black sky event. And black sky events can be caused by more than just the main threat that could occur. So just keep that in mind. These are overarching themes that'll be part of the game. I used this slide a couple of times and I'm going to use it again this year because what I'm hoping to do out of today's session is to get you to start thinking about how can you use EarthX? How can you put it into play in a meaningful way for yourself and your organization? You've heard me talk about individual and family preparedness. At an organizational level, though, you've got the opportunity to play in a couple of different manners. We had some incredibly inventive ways of playing organizationally last year in the pandemic, where people still use the virtual tools, everybody played their own lane. They played at home, and then they did a gathering of people on one of the web conferencing capabilities and conducted their discussion that way. Prior to that, we saw groups play in a centralized manner, but then decentralize out the feedback for the after action part. And remember, you've got the ability to break down into different functional groups. There were two things that I thought were very inventive 2 years ago that happened. One was to have the exercise played by two different operational groups. One group was playing ops, another group was playing resource management. And then after they both played, they came together to back brief each other. And it was amazing the feedback we got about what they each saw that the other one missed, or how they complemented each other in the direction that they wanted to go. The other one, though, that was really a hallmark that I thought was just outstanding was one organization played an A team versus B team. So they had their A team, which is the primary people that sat in the seats making the decisions, play. Then their play was over with. They brought in the B team and they let the B team play. And then they were able to back brief each other. And it was interesting, the feedback we got, both teams had independent wins. Both did well, but it was a great opportunity for some cross learning and some mentorship. And then ultimately the idea of having senior leaders play and then let junior leaders play. Because EarthX is free, it is up for multiple days. You can engage it in a couple of different manners. It's a great opportunity to flex your exercising and training models and take full advantage of what we're offering here. All we want is some great feedback at the end of it. So we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of where we're going for this year. These are the 3 development webinar dates. Well, the initial planning meeting obviously is today. We're compressing our timeline a little bit to take advantage of some work group activity that I'll talk about. We will have the middle planning meeting, which will add some more value to these slides in a couple of weeks on 6 May. And then we will wrap up the final planning on the 3rd of June. So really in about less than a 90-day window, we're going to take you through the initial, middle, and final planning meetings. And that's on purpose because we don't want to drag out the development. The development team has already got the framework in place, but we've got some opportunities that we want you to take advantage of and join us at the table, so to speak. We're also going to do a number of scheduled training webinars. So if you did play EarthX last year, you remember we had about 8 specialized training webinars for EMP and cyber. Very, very well received. Those webinars actually turned into a new initiative that the council is supporting called the Global Resilience Commission. So because we've got the Global Resilience Commission webinars going each month, and if you don't have those, I'll make sure to get those in an email to you so you can sign up and participate if you're interested. We're going to cut back a little bit on the number of training webinars, and we're going to focus on specific training capabilities that will help you with your EarthX play or your overall planning. The first one will be on the 17th of June. We're going to deconstruct fire resilience. We're going to bring in some outstanding speakers that actually have a long history in working with major wildland fires and how they can impact the community. We'll follow that one up on the 15th of July with one on flooding. As I mentioned earlier, flooding presents some extremely difficult situations to deal with. And then we're going to follow that one up with more of a holistic approach to understanding real community resilience. And in that one, we're going to go in some different directions. We're going to talk about how to ensure overall resilience of your community. And we're going to take a look at some of the opportunities that are out there for funding and collaborative work to actually build a more resilient community wherever you're at. And then finally, we got such tremendous feedback on what we did last year. We're going to do it again this year. On the 30th of August, just before we release EarthX, we will conduct the EarthX World Status Briefing. And that'll be an interesting one to participate in because we're going to take a hard look at a number of black sky threat impacts that have been occurring over the last year and paint a picture of what's going on, why it's going on. And of course, with climate change as our underlying theme, there's so much to be concerned about, but the opportunities are there too to make some dramatic changes while we still have the opportunity to hopefully impact the long-term impacts. A few other dates for you to keep in mind. As always, we will train your facilitators. We recommend every organization that's going to play as an organization have someone attend these sessions if at all possible. The first one there, session 1 in July, we'll actually talk about how to play EarthX, how to approach it, how to get your people ready. The final one will be more of a walk through the documentation of EarthX that will be provided. You'll notice we'll be providing again this year a participant workbook and our facilitator workbook. I think the team did a great job last year. Those were extremely well received and very beneficial to hang on to for the long haul. There will be sections in this year's workbook specifically about fire and flood, and probably some on community resilience as well. So these are all things to throw on your calendar and see if you can attend. As always, if you can't make a session, as I mentioned earlier, we record these sessions and we do make the slides available. And you can't beat that for free. So for those of you all that are graphically oriented, I used a version of this slide last year to kind of get you ready for what EarthX, when you sit down, you've registered, you're ready to kick it off and you jump into it. It's going to flow like you see on this slide, moving from the left to the right, top to bottom. There will be an opening video, which will be the attack scenario, the theme of the attack. Then establishing situational awareness. You'll advance that with some new information we'll provide in video format. You'll get a chance to really dig into risk and risk assessment. You'll get a chance to develop your courses of action. Once you've got that initial course of action, we're going to give you some more information through Monte Carlo. We'll talk about that in a second. Then you'll get to make your initial set of decisions. And then after that, you'll get to play Monte Carlo again, gather some more information, and then your final actions. What is it that you think you're going to do to be prepared for the specific threat that you're facing in the individual phases? Phase 1 and phase 2 will follow this format. And then finally this year, we're going to do a closing video again that outlines the process and the path towards full restoration. So kind of a bit of a help there on getting you to where you need to be. Just a couple of slides that highlight, when we talk about establishing situational awareness, this is an active process within the exercise that you can spin up your team and actually build your own situational awareness. We will provide you with information in a variety of sources, and you should plan on building your own idea of what's going on based off what you're provided. Then you'll get a chance to really look at risk, and risk is something that is unique to each organization and each individual. It depends on where you're at, your level of preparedness, the level of threat you're facing, as it says there, your level of exposure, how vulnerable are you? And then you've got to step back because these are black sky events and wonder about cascading consequences. And those are all parts of the exercise that we will highlight and lead you, we hope, in the right direction so that your plans will improve as you go forward. You'll build your own courses of action, and finally, you'll nominate one of those, and you'll make that decision that will set you up for that final Monte Carlo. So when we talk about Monte Carlo, it's going to be a little bit different this year, but very much along the same lines. You will be required to basically spin the dice, roll the wheel, whatever you want to call it, a number of times to collect customized injects for each functional area. What that means is no two plays of EarthX are exactly the same. Each time you register, each time you spin the dice, you get a different set of injects. It's not to say that you might not get the same one twice, but you'll never get the same exact set twice. So what that does is it gives you a different level of variability. I think it explains why people enjoyed playing multiple times last year. So we think it adds some excitement to the game and to the exercise, and really kind of gamifies it a little bit more. So we hope you look forward to that too. It's always a fun thing to put together. It takes a lot of work though, because if you can imagine 38 different lanes and every lane has got a different set of injects, we end up writing hundreds of injects to meet that demand. But that's what the team is all about. So hopefully that's helping you all too. So I'm going to stop here for a second and just kind of pause and talk for a minute. We have a tremendous opportunity for everybody on this call today. And I will send it out in the notes to everybody that registered. But if you're on, I want you to hear in my voice the sincerity of this offer. We're capable of building EarthX with next to no input, but that's not what we want to do. We want to begin to actually build work groups, local, regional, and international work groups that help us move resilience forward. So our first step in this direction is a series of work groups that are going to kick off beginning next week in the 4 areas that you see highlighted on this slide. Now, there's no requirement to do this, but if you really want to get in and help us develop both EarthX and where the Global Resilience Commission is going, why not join up and be part of the team? No cost, totally free. The first series of webinars are going to be GoToWebinar, much like this. You'll get a chance to register. You'll get a chance to listen to some panel experts discuss their views on what ought to be part of the exercise. But then you'll also get a chance to complete some questions and email those back into us and let us know your thoughts. And your thoughts will make it into the exercise. If they've got value, we promise to include those. So we've got a number of people that have agreed to jump on board early, and they're going to be part of this initial panel discussion. And you never know, if you jump on and register, you may be able to be part of an upcoming panel discussion. We're going to move it around a little bit, but we are going to facilitate the initial discussions. Don't try to write down those registration links. They'll come out in an email to you. You will need to register pretty quickly because, as I said, most of these are in the next 2 weeks. But I hope you'll view this as a really great opportunity, working in a very much a virtual distributed environment, to jump in and be part of the team. We were blown away by the feedback we got last year to the survey questions and to actual information that was put into the exercise. And we realize that there are people out there with great skill sets that can help us all get better. So why not think about giving a couple hours of your time, jump in, meet some nice people, add your input to their input, and help make the exercise better for everybody. And to that end, some of the things that we're going to look at, and I'm going to foot stomp this first one, and I've got a personal request to everybody on this call. I want you to give me some feedback on how we can get the word out about EarthX. Last year, as I mentioned, we had 41 countries playing, over 12,000 people. And that's great. That's awesome. That's amazing for something that is basically free and doesn't use a lot of advertising. But it's a drop in the bucket from the number of people that ought to play. So I'm really encouraging you to give me some feedback and tell me, hey, you could try this, you could try that. We have a network we could send the information out to for you. We'd like to involve our network. We have a number of network partners already working with us for the last 3 and 4 years doing this, but we always want more. EarthX is free, the engine is huge, we won't slow it down. We play worldwide, we've got 60 days of play. Our goal ought to be that as many people as possible get the word about this and take a shot and see what they think. And then the second part of this offer is to really get in and listen to what's being talked about next week on what ought to be the drivers for each one of these functional areas, and then give us your thoughts. And you'll see we're talking about injects and environmental conditions you may have heard of, resource issues that may have happened, workforce issues that seem to happen all the time. And then finally, this whole idea of special training concepts that come from your real world experiences, things that you've seen or you've read about. You're the only one that can add those to our mix. So we're really looking forward to getting your feedback in email form, however you choose to send it. But I really would encourage, if you've got the time, join one of those work groups that's near and dear to your heart and see what's being talked about. As I mentioned, we've got some great first panelists that are going to lead that initial discussion. So I hope you'll take me up on those offers and help us make this as good as it can be. So because I love you guys all so much, I put this slide together specifically for this group. You're the first ones to hear about this. We took last year's exercise and we broke it in half. And available today, you can now register and play a modified version of the electromagnetic pulse exercise and the cyber threat exercise online for free. So you're the first ones to hear about this. Those 2 links will come out in the email, but you can play these as many times as you want. Share them with your friends. If you did play last year, you know that the videos were amazing and the game itself was engaging, and it really made you think about some things that maybe you hadn't thought about before. we got such great feedback, we didn't want to just mothball it. Ranger Dorn, my partner in all this, took the time to break it in part. Our exercise programmer took it. We built a new BattleWork framework for it. And so now you can register and within minutes actually play the exercise all the way through towards survey and get a certificate for these exercises. So it's the full adventure, so to speak. So those 2 exercises are available now. And when you get your slides in the email that follows up, you'll have those links. And then we'll be doing the public announcement of this in about 2 or 3 weeks. That's why this is for you guys only, early adopters, a kind of a special announcement. You can get in first. Not the last thing, but pretty close to the last thing. We're about to wrap up. This is an offer that's on the table. And I literally just got off a call before this webinar to talk to somebody about this. If you've got a group that you think would benefit from learning about EarthX, but you don't want to do the presentation, or you think it'd be better if I did it or one of my team did it, if you will send us an email at the EarthX email address, we will do everything we can to arrange a time to meet with your group and actually do a customized presentation. I'm always excited about doing that. We've done it for InfraGard in the past. We've done them for CERENT in the EU. If you've got a group out there that you think we could help you encourage people to play, just let us know. We'll be happy to find a way to do it. I've got a full team of sector coordinators. They're all very accomplished folks, and they would be happy to take you up on that offer and make that presentation. Finally, this is just one so Ranger and I don't have to answer the question 10,000 times. When does the exercise start? 1 September through 31 October. You pick the date, you pick the time. The exercise will be available sometime at midnight in the middle of the Pacific at the end of August, so that it's available for Australia to start their play. And I'm sure we'll have play in Australia again. So remember, just you pick the time, you pick the date, anytime within those periods. And I will say this, I do believe we are going to bring it down this year at the end of October, because we hope to add it to our exercise capability so that it'll join EMP and cyber, and there will be a fire and flood resilient exercise. So this is my last slide. That's our email address. Ranger and I manage that. Feel free to shoot us any questions you've got. I'm not going to try to answer questions on the question if any have come in. Ranger's capturing all those, and we'll get back to you offline. I prefer to actually get them through Mr. Google and get them where we can get you a quality answer and maybe do some attachments. That registration is not the right registration. It will be close to that, but it's not exactly that, so don't try to register yet. Registration will not be available for EarthX until 1 May. So I missed that, taking that off that slide, so I'll do push-ups after this. Registration for EarthX, though, is 1 May. There will be an announcement, and all of you all that registered for this particular webinar will get that announcement, and we'll put it out through our normal media too. So with that being said, it's Friday afternoon where I'm at, and it'll be Friday afternoon wherever you're at some point in the near future. I hope you all are staying well, and I hope you have a great weekend. Again, my name is John Heltzel. I'm the Director for Resilience Planning for the Electric Infrastructure Security Council. And for me and Mr. Dorn, thanks for being part of our webinar today. And we hope you'll join us on our work groups in the next couple of weeks. And we'll see you at the middle planning meeting if you can make it. Everybody take care and be safe. Thanks.